They found him sitting alone, slumped over in his recliner. No trauma, no mess, no signs of struggle. Just silence. The kind of silence that only follows something final. The TV was still on, casting a dull glow across the room. His robe was still open, his slippers slightly crooked on the carpet, and the air, still, heavy, filled with that unmistakable emptiness that settles when something irreversible has happened. The autopsy said it was natural causes, but those of us who understand the signs, we knew better. What took him wasn't disease, it wasn't sudden, it was gradual, invisible, and tragically common. A quiet, hormonal collapse, a slow, preventable slide into physical and emotional decay, not from illness, but from neglect. The kind of neglect that happens when a man believes he's doing the right thing by letting go of what he thinks no longer matters, and he's not the only one. Every year, thousands of older men in their 60s, 70s, even 80s, begin to fade. They lose strength, they lose desire, they lose emotional balance, not because they're old, but because they unknowingly give up the very habits that once kept them vibrant. One of those habits? Masturbation. Yeah, I said it. For decades, we've told men it's something to be ashamed of, that it's something you're supposed to grow out of, that it's immature, unnecessary, even dirty. But after the age of 60, believing that can cost you more than just a little pride, it can cost you your health. Because here's what nobody says out loud. When you stop masturbating as an older man, your body doesn't just hit pause, it begins to decline. Your prostate stops flushing, your testosterone plummets, your mental clarity dulls, and by the time you realize something's wrong, you're already years behind. I'm Dr. Mojit Kara, a board-certified urologist and men's health expert. For more than 40 years, I've worked with men from all walks of life. Farmers, veterans, engineers, teachers, men who thought they were doing the right thing by giving up sexual expression in their later years. And I've seen the regret in their eyes when they realized that what they stopped doing, in the name of discipline, was quietly unraveling their vitality. But there's good news. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 4 real health consequences that can happen when you stop masturbating in your later years. More importantly, I'm going to show you how to prevent them using simple, medically grounded steps that thousands of my patients have used to protect their energy, confidence, and independence. And stick around, because the final consequence I'll cover is one even most doctors avoid talking about. But ignoring it could triple your risk of prostate complications. If you care about protecting your body, your mind, and your identity as you age, this is a conversation you need to hear. Now, if you're with me, type 1 in the comments, and if you're not sure yet, type 0. I welcome both, because this isn't about judgment, it's about honesty. And it's a conversation men have waited too long to have. Let's begin. Consequence. 1. Your sexual function begins to shut down. I've seen this story repeat more times than I can count. A man walks into my office in his late 60s, maybe early 70s. He looks healthy enough, but he's frustrated, confused, sometimes even scared. He tells me he hasn't had a spontaneous erection in months, maybe longer, and it didn't fade gradually, it just stopped. That sudden change catches men off guard. They think they're still active, still capable, and then one day, it's gone. No morning erections, no arousal, no response, just silence. And they don't know why. Here's the truth. Your sexual function isn't some magical system that stays online just because you want it to. It's a use it or lose it system. Your penis isn't a decoration, it's a vascular organ, meaning it depends on regular blood flow and oxygen to stay healthy. When you stop stimulating it altogether, whether that's from sex or solo activity, the blood flow decreases, the oxygen supply drops, and slowly, the tissues begin to stiffen, literally. Not in the good way, in the way that leads to fibrosis, nerve degradation, and permanent erectile dysfunction. This isn't theory, this is basic biology. If you stopped walking for 6 months, your legs would lose muscle, your joints would stiffen, your balance would falter. You'd practically forget how to walk. It's no different with sexual function. When it's ignored for too long, your body assumes it's no longer needed, and it begins to shut it down. The worst part? It's silent. You don't get a warning. One day it just doesn't work. Then you try again, nothing. Then even medication doesn't help because the underlying structure is already damaged. I've had men in tears asking me if they can get it back. Some do, with therapy, medical support, and a lot of time. But many don't. Because they waited too long, they thought abstaining was the mature choice. But what they were really doing was neglecting a vital system that needs care, just like the heart or the lungs. And let me be clear, this isn't about being obsessed with sex, it's about keeping your body healthy. Masturbating once or twice a week can be enough to keep circulation strong, nerves responsive, and function intact. That's it. Just a little regular attention. Because if you don't use it, you start to lose it. And after a certain age, that loss becomes permanent. I've seen men devastated, not because of ego, but because they lost a part of their identity. And it was completely preventable. All it takes is consistency, not indulgence, not obsession, just consistent self-care. But losing erections? That's just the beginning. Consequence number 2. Your hormones begin to crash. What most men don't realize is that giving up self-pleasure doesn't just affect the bedroom. It sends ripple effects through your entire endocrine system. Your testosterone, your dopamine, your energy, your emotional stability, they all begin to shift, subtly at first, but powerfully over time. Here's how it usually starts. A man stops masturbating. A few weeks go by, then a few months. He starts to feel different. Not broken, just off. He wakes up less energized, skips his walks, feels more tired, more flat, more distant. Maybe his appetite changes. Maybe he snaps at loved ones more often. And when I sit down with these men, they usually chalk it up to just getting older, or stress, or bad sleep. But when we run their labs, what we often see is a significant drop in testosterone. Not just age-related decline, but accelerated loss triggered by a lack of sexual stimulation. Here's what most people don't know. Regular arousal, even solo, stimulates the hypothalamus, boosts dopamine, and tells your testicles, keep working. We still need testosterone. But when that stimulation disappears, the brain gets the opposite message. We're done with this. And the body scales back production, fast. Once that hormonal collapse starts, reversing it becomes difficult. Testosterone doesn't just affect libido. It affects motivation, focus, muscle, bone strength, mood, even heart health. I had a retired firefighter tell me once, "Doc, I don't recognize the man in the mirror anymore." And he wasn't talking about looks. He was talking about identity. But it didn't have to be that way. A little education, a simple habit. That's all it would have taken to protect his hormones and his sense of self. Because when your testosterone crashes in old age, getting it back isn't easy. It takes years, thousands of dollars in therapy, and even then, it might never fully return. But if you keep that spark alive, even just a little, it can protect you in ways most men never hear about. And that brings us to the third consequence, one that's felt not just emotionally, but physically, every single day. But while most men fear losing their erections, what they don't realize is that's just the beginning. The next consequence of quitting masturbation affects something even deeper, your hormones. And once they begin to crash, the ripple effects go far beyond the bedroom. It usually starts subtly. A man stops feeling like himself, but he can't quite explain why. He's not as eager to get out of bed, skips his walks, his appetite changes, and his mood gets flatter. He feels tired during the day, more irritable, more withdrawn. Deep down, he senses something important is slipping away, but he can't put his finger on it. Many of my patients chalk it up to stress or aging, but when we dig deeper, we often find the same root cause. His testosterone has dropped, not just naturally, but faster and more severely due to the total loss of sexual stimulation. Here's what most people don't hear. Masturbation is one of the few non-pharmaceutical ways older men can stimulate natural testosterone production. This isn't about fantasy or desire, it's biology. When you engage in regular arousal and release, your brain sends signals that keep your hormonal rhythm active. Dopamine rises, the hypothalamus gets triggered, and your testicles, even in your 60s or 70s, get the message to keep producing testosterone. But when you stop completely for weeks or months, your body gets a different message. This part of life is over, and it scales back hormone production accordingly. And once that downward cycle begins, it's hard to stop. Men with low testosterone don't just feel tired, they start to lose who they are. They struggle to focus, their passions fade, their muscles weaken, bones become more fragile, and they become more prone to depression. Worst of all, their cardiovascular risk climbs, putting them in greater danger of heart attacks or strokes. I've seen vibrant, active men become shadows of themselves in just a few short years, not because of disease, but because no one told them how important regular sexual activity is for hormonal health. One patient, a retired firefighter, told me he started to feel like he didn't matter anymore. He said, "Doc, I don't even recognize the man in the mirror." It wasn't about vanity. It was grief for what he had lost without even realizing it. And all of it was preventable. A simple habit he thought was inappropriate or unnecessary could have preserved his energy, confidence, and purpose. Because here's the hard truth. Once your testosterone crashes in old age, it can take years and a lot of money to bring it back if it comes back at all. But with steady, respectful engagement in your own intimacy, you can hold the line longer than most think possible. And while hormonal decline can be invisible, the next consequence is far more physical. A kind of discomfort that builds deep in the body until it starts interfering with everyday life. And yet most men don't realize it's tied to one simple habit they've stopped. Let me explain. There's a quiet kind of pain that many older men never mention. A dull ache in the pelvis, a pressure that builds after sitting too long, or an urge to urinate even when the bladder's empty. It doesn't strike suddenly like a heart attack. It creeps in slowly until it becomes part of daily life. And by the time most men bring it up with a doctor, they've already been suffering for months, sometimes even years. What is surprising is how often this discomfort can be traced back to one overlooked cause: prostate congestion, due to a lack of ejaculation. Your prostate isn't just some passive gland, it's active. It produces and stores seminal fluid, and that fluid is meant to move. When you stop masturbating or having sex altogether, especially as you get older, that fluid begins to stagnate. It thickens, pressure builds, and inflammation sets in. That's when symptoms appear: slower urine flow, discomfort in the lower back, or frequent urges to urinate, especially at night. As a urologist, I've seen countless men who think they have bladder issues, only to find that their prostate is inflamed and congested. And in many cases, the best solution isn't medication, it's movement. It's the body's natural way of clearing out the buildup through regular ejaculation. When that process stops for too long, the consequences become serious. Some men develop chronic prostatitis, a long-term painful condition that's hard to treat and even harder to live with. Others end up needing invasive procedures to regain comfort. Beyond the discomfort, there's a more serious danger that most men never hear about. Research, including a respected Harvard study, suggests that regular ejaculation may reduce the risk of prostate cancer. The logic is simple. When the prostate is regularly emptied, harmful substances are less likely to accumulate. But when fluid is allowed to sit for months or years, inflammation increases and so may cancer risk. I once treated a man who had gone nearly 2 years without any sexual activity. He didn't feel the urge, he said. Thought that chapter of his life was behind him. But when his PSA levels suddenly spiked, we ran tests and found a swollen, irritated prostate filled with congestion. He was facing a potential biopsy, something that could have been avoided with a habit as simple as occasional release. This isn't about indulgence, it's about maintenance. It's about giving your body the care it still needs, even if your mind tells you you've outgrown it. Because your prostate doesn't stop aging after 60. In fact, it becomes more vulnerable. And if neglected, the damage isn't just uncomfortable, it can be life-altering. But while the physical discomfort of prostate congestion is hard to ignore, the final consequence is something far more subtle and far more devastating. It's the slow emotional withdrawal that happens when a man gives up self-pleasure entirely. Not everyone feels it right away. Some don't notice it for months, but eventually it catches up. It begins with a fading spark, a slow drift away from joy, curiosity, and even a sense of self. You stop masturbating not because you feel bad, but because you feel like there is no reason to anymore. You tell yourself it's part of aging, or that intimacy is for younger men. But over time, this quiet decision starts affecting your mood, your mind, your soul. I've spoken to men who tell me they feel numb inside, not sick, not depressed, just distant, like they've lost touch with a part of themselves they used to know. And they don't talk about it. Most older men were never taught how, but it shows in the way they avoid mirrors, in the way their voices soften when you ask how they're really doing. This is deeper than libido. It's about identity, because even occasional intimacy keeps you connected to your emotions, to your body, to your vitality. The chemicals released during masturbation, dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, aren't just pleasure signals. They're key to mental health. They reduce stress, lift mood, and help you feel human. Without them, men are more likely to feel depressed, isolated, and even experience cognitive decline. I've watched once confident men grow withdrawn and apathetic, not because their lives fell apart, but because they stopped connecting with themselves. And that's what makes this final consequence so tragic. Most men never realize it's happening. They don't see the connection between their emotional decline and the choice they made months ago to give up self-pleasure. By the time they feel the loss, the damage is already in motion. Reversing it takes more than medicine. It takes reconnecting with the part of yourself that still wants to live, still wants to feel, still matters. Because what is being lost isn't just a physical habit. It is a lifeline to vitality. And this is the one consequence that breaks my heart the most, because it steals a man's dignity without him even noticing. But the truth I want you to hear is this: it is not too late to come back, not too late to feel like yourself again. In the final part of this video, I'll show you how, the science-backed steps you can take today to restore what so many older men have quietly lost. Let's finish this together. So how do you begin to reclaim what's been lost? How can an older man, whether 60, 70, or even 80, bring back the vitality, the clarity, the quiet confidence that once defined him? The good news is, you don't need extreme supplements, expensive hormone therapy, or to chase some illusion of youth. You need a few simple, consistent habits, rooted in science, backed by research, and proven in real lives. The first step is one most men overlook: intentionally rebuilding your connection to your body. That means taking time, without shame or urgency, to re-establish a healthy self-touch routine, not for escape or fantasy, but for physical and hormonal maintenance. Many men feel awkward about this at first, especially if it's been months or years. But the goal isn't performance, it's presence. It's retraining your brain and body to communicate again. Even just once or twice a week can restart the hormonal signaling pathway: testosterone, dopamine, oxytocin, all of which help regulate mood, energy, and even immune response. Next, support your body nutritionally and physically. Certain foods can boost natural testosterone: eggs, nuts, cruciferous vegetables, fatty fish like salmon, and foods rich in zinc and vitamin D. At the same time, avoid excess sugar, processed carbs, and alcohol, which suppress testosterone and increase inflammation. Daily movement is equally essential. Not just cardio, but strength training, even light bodyweight exercises. Lifting stimulates testosterone. Walking boosts circulation, and both improve mood. A sedentary body sends signals of shutdown. A moving body signals life. Then there's sleep, which many older men neglect. Poor sleep destroys testosterone levels. Aim for 7 to 8 hours of consistent rest in a dark, cool room, without screens before bed. Melatonin and magnesium supplements can help, but nothing replaces a healthy routine. Same bedtime, minimal caffeine after noon, and winding down early. Most importantly, rebuild intimacy on your own terms. That could mean journaling, reconnecting with old passions, or even starting honest conversations with a partner. The goal is to reawaken desire, not just sexual, but for life. You'd be amazed how many men regain confidence, purpose, and strength simply by rediscovering what lights them up again. One of my patients, a 72-year-old widower, told me he thought his best years were behind him. He hadn't touched himself in over 5 years. But after we talked, he committed to just 2 things: 10 minutes of daily movement and 1 moment each week where he let himself feel connected to his body again. 3 months later, he walked into my office smiling. "Doc," he said, "I feel like I woke up from a long nap." His voice had strength again, his posture had changed, not because of some miracle, because he started listening to his body instead of ignoring it. And that's what I want for you. Not to chase youth, but to reclaim you, the man beneath the noise, the man who still wants to live fully. Because aging doesn't mean fading, it means evolving. And with the right habits, you can stay sharp, strong and vibrant far longer than you've been told. You just need to begin. Start small. 1 moment, 1 choice, 1 habit at a time. And your body will meet you halfway, every single time.